Right, we're off. Welcome return to Unconditional Surrender. This is part 5 of my playthrough. Just getting into the August 42 turn. And it's been an interesting game, different to others that I've played, primarily because there's no Italy in the war, and I'm also trying out those changes that were I think put in by Sal a couple of years ago. Three main ones. One was the change to the weather, such that the weather was not quite so random, a bit more controlled. That seems to be working fine. The other big change was forcing the type of combat in the poor weather. So in poor weather and in severe weather you can only assault, and that makes a really big difference, and I think it's a really positive change to the rule. It speeds up the winter, sort of late autumn, early spring, winter turns. That goes by much more quickly, whereas before you could still get 2 or 3 mobile attacks in poor weather, and you're looking for that 5-2, 6-1, 5-1 sort of result on the dice difference. So it's worth just rolling, all but sort of the last 5-10% aren't going to have any effect. So there's a lot of aristage with the old system. Now it seems much smoother and much more historical, that you're going to gain ground more slowly in the poor weather. Still worth making some assaults. There was some hexes grabbed, and a few steps incurred, but not a great deal. And the last change, which I've yet to see, the big one, is that when you upgrade a Russian infantry army to a motorised guard army, that costs you two armies to make one guard army. So that's just about to be enacted, because a couple of guard armies have appeared in the upgrade box. So we'll see how that works out. I was a bit sceptical of the Axis chances in this game, because you might recall that the Allies had managed to force a landing into France in 41, which was diverting a few resources which were really needed on the Eastern Front. And summer 41 hadn't gone particularly well, so I thought, well, I'm sort of keen to push on with it, because I want to see what happens, give all these changes a good shakedown. But what has happened is that the Germans were able to eject the British from France. They moved a Panzer army back to France to assist the other armies that had to eject the British, and they used the poor weather that was in May and June of 42 to get a level of superiority over the Russian air, because both sides suffer a -2 for having air combat in poor weather, but with the +2 that the Germans get, they were able to trade sorties in a favourable ratio, which meant that when the good weather kicked in July, they'd pretty much neutralised the Russian air for some cost to their own, but it gave them the ability to have air supremacy on key parts of the front, such that the July term was pretty devastating for the Russians. I mean, they lost 3 shock armies and 4 or 5 infantry armies, and with 2 more turns of guaranteed good weather, it could be quite a tough time for them. So you'll be seeing the map shortly, and the other flip side is that because the strategic warfare tends to go in favour of the Germans against the the Western Allies, because they've got the benefit of the French port for the U-boats and some air based in Scandinavia. The British can't really get 20 production points. Why is that important? Well, that's important because they had their invasion in 41, got a bit of a foothold, but only really had 2 decent field units. So it could never pose any serious threat, but it still made the Germans react. But I think that they may have been better advised to keep their surprise attack marker on hold and potentially do an invasion in 42. I say that because in 42 the American task force turns up, as does a British armoured unit, and I think if you can have 4 units going into France in 42, then it's a much more of a viable threat. But because they've been losing the strategic warfare battle, they're only having typically between sort of 14 and 16 production points spare each turn, which means that they haven't got the 20. And if they buy one now, when they're just starting to get some bombers coming in to give them some positive DRMs on the strategic warfare role, they might be able to buy back their marker by the end of the summer. But then of course there's a 4-turn delay, because when you buy it back it arrives 4 turns later. So we're looking at second front in 43, I suspect, which, you know, if the Russians can hang on, could be fine. Who knows? So in summary, I think the rules changes are very, very good. I think the weather just feels a bit more stable, and I think, as I said, the poor weather effect on combat is very positive. So I'll give you a look at the map, and you can see the progress. Okay, you can see France is fully back under the Axis control. They'll want to reoccupy Cherbourg at some point, but there's no immediate danger of another invasion because, as I said, there's no surprise marker available. So that's going to be pretty quiet for the foreseeable future. The air unit in Stavanger did actually move down to, I think it was Antwerp or somewhere, to assist the Panzer Army to be able to chuck the British out of Le Havre, and then it moved back strategically to the East Front where it was needed. And the East Front, we've just had the July turn where we've had a lot of damage caused by the German forces. You can see the state of the Russian Air Force. There are, I think, 4 Russian air. They're all on 44 now because they've just had a chance to rebuild. And the Germans have 1 on 4, 2 on 2, and 1 fresh. So they'll probably use the fresh one to launch airstrikes on these 2 forers. Rack them up to 6 sorties, which will then give them freedom to conduct air operations in this area without being interfered with. And yeah, there are 3 Panzer armies and also the motorised Africa Corps, which normally would be operating in North Africa. So that's also joined. There is a German tank unit in the asset, so they can get to use tanks for 1 round of combat. So with 2 more turns of good weather, they're going to be punching through. I'm sure that Kharkov and Kursk are both going to fall. I suppose historically the front line is probably a bit back on where it should be, but I'm expecting a fairly extensive change to this. I think they're going to push on quite a lot. There's Voronezh. So do they head for Stalingrad, or maybe swing up and try and threaten Moscow. But either way, it's going to get a bit ugly, I think, for the Russians. But their will has dropped down to 43. So I don't know how feasible a collapse is. I guess time will tell, and we'll let you know how it works out.